Good evening. This is John Bailey, and this is People to be Heard, the program where people who have something to say have their say. Tonight, you've got Sean Pica, Executive Director of Hudson Link for Higher Education in Prison, the only in-prison program helping prison inmates in the state of New York. They administer programs in 5 New York prisons in the area: Fishkill, Greene, Sing Sing, Sullivan, and Taconic. Hudson Link partners with 5 area colleges who provide the prison classes. They are Mercy College, Nyack, SUNY, Sullivan, Siena, and Vassar, and Columbia. Then Mr. Pica will be chairing, the National Consortium for Higher Education in Prison, taking place in Phoenix on March the 10th, with 10 states joining in as you try and extend the program. So, Sean, tell us about how Hudson Link started.
First of all, thank you so much for having me tonight. It's a very exciting time between President Obama's and Governor Cuomo's initiatives that potentially might help pay for some of this work. Up until now, about 15 years, we've been raising all the money for these programs privately through individual contributions and grant writing. There were programs like this one, about 300 plus across the country, up until 1994. When the restriction to the crime bill restricted the funding of these programs with the Pell and TAP funding, about 300 of these programs disappeared overnight. The men at Sing Sing began to brainstorm and talk with the superintendent at the facility about how to create a college program without the funding. And Nyack College stepped in and created the first program at Sing Sing in 1998.
Sean, when I was working for ABC News, people would say to me, "Peter Katz, you ask the most embarrassing questions." So let me live up to my reputation.
All right, go for it. I knew this was coming.
There are many people out there who have worked very hard to put their children through college. There are individuals who on their own have gotten through college. They have racked up tens of thousands of dollars in student loans. They're having trouble finding jobs, etc. They're going to say, why are we giving free college to criminals? Is that fair? What's your answer?
I think it's a good question, and absolutely something that my own family has struggled with. I think about the student debt that I've racked up over the years working on my 3rd graduate degree, but the fact is, none of this is free. These men and women, when they're returning to these communities, the communities that they left once hurting, they're coming back as role models. They're coming back as helpers in the community. Almost every one of these students that returns to the community has become a social worker or a caseworker to a student. So these helping roles have done nothing but bolster the communities, but they're also coming back able to work, able to pay taxes, and legitimately assist the community.
And how many of them, if any, end up back in prison at some point?
Right now in this country, 66% of the men and women that go to prison return to prison in the first 3 years. The number is staggering. New York does a little bit of a better job. It's about 41%. Hudson Link has a less than 1% recidivism rate in 15 years.
Right. What is it that made you so interested in helping change the lives of criminals?
I knew you were going to do this to me.
Well, I'm just living up to my reputation.
I know. I heard all about it. New York is one of only 2 states that sentences their teenagers as adults. And when I was 16 years old, I made some poor choices. I received a 24-year sentence and found myself in a world I didn't know existed. As I entered a maximum security prison, really thinking my life was over. Couldn't even wrap my head around the fact that I would be there for 2 decades. Feeling very sorry about myself. One of the officers came to the cell and said, Sean, we could really use your help. And I definitely thought he was messing with me. Like, how could I can't even help myself. How am I possibly going to help him or the facility? And he said, you're one of the most educated guys around. And I had only been to the 9th grade.
You mean you were in 9th grade when whatever happened,
yeah.
and you got arrested and sentenced?
And in that process, he asked if I would help the other men that lived in that prison learn to read and write. It was a life-changing point for me, but also gave me a chance to help someone else really understand what education meant in a much broader scope.
So now you're taking a group of criminals. You are giving them the opportunity for a college education. You're giving them the opportunity for a degree which, when they're released, they can put to good use, they can change their lives.
Their diploma does not say Sing Sing. It says the university they graduated from.
Which could be Columbia, it could be Mercy College, it could be SUNY. How many lives have you touched with this program? Over how many years has it been going, first of all?
So this is our 15th year. In those years, 451 of the men and women that have been through the program are now home, in the community, working and doing well. 86% are currently employed or back in grad school. But we also have 400 plus that have been through the program and not released, because there's no correlation between taking this program and being released. Those other men and women that have gone through it and not been released help run it. They help run the facilities. They work very closely with key positions where an education is needed, but there are not many folks with an education. So it's the Department of Corrections in New York has really partnered with us to utilize these men and women until their release.
So actually, so the Hudson Link program actually changes lives outside of prison and inside prison.
Yeah, I think way more of the important work happens before release.
And how many of these individuals who are in the program come to you afterwards and can explain how this has affected them? Or is it something that you just never hear about and you're just doing this program
No, we do,
because of your perception?
We hear every day, and the ironic part is, a few years ago we began to do an alumni program. So we hired, through a grant, we hired one of our own alumni that served 25 years in prison to coordinate our alumni efforts, which is a 4-part plan. Business attire. All the education in the world is worthless if you don't have a clean shirt. Every other month, networking dinners, which means we get together with the men and women that have been through the program and now home, down in the city, to bring a resume. Let's talk about job development. It's been very effective for employment. The other is we are in contact daily with all the released men and women, and that just, you know, what are you up to? What are you doing? Parole is challenging, but it's not as challenging if you know you're not going through it alone. So just being in contact with your fellow alumni has been very helpful. And of course, the final piece is that we support them. We're in their corner. They know they're not alone in this effort, and that's been very important.
So how was the program actually administered?
So good question. This is a legitimate degree-granting, accredited college program. The same textbooks, we use adjunct professors, and curriculum as would be on the traditional campus. The students have to have a high school diploma or a GED before they can even apply, and then the application process has the same college placement exam as would be on the traditional campus. Everything else, if anything, the professors have continually said they demand more from the prison students than what they get from the traditional students.
Well, is this a replacement for the normal day-to-day prison activities? For example, I understand that inmates in New York State are required to do work at a very minimal wage, but nonetheless they're required to do certain things during the day that the state says you have to do. So is this in addition to that, or is it a replacement? Or what?
Excellent question. The reason why I say that is because a lot of folks, even the ones in favor of what we do, will say, well, hey, they're just sitting in their cell all day, they might as well go to school. But the fact of the matter is, every man and woman incarcerated in the New York State Department of Corrections is required to have a work assignment, full-time job, as anyone else would have. They're running the prison, the laundry, food service, law library, cleaning. The whole prison is really maintained through supervisory staff by the inmates. So if you decide you want to go to college, and if you go through the application process, and if you are accepted, it is above and beyond your daily work schedule.
Now, what sort of majors do you offer? Is it a liberal arts education? Can they specialize? Do you have a law program?
Another good question. One of the things that happened from the very beginning is we asked the students if we did have a major, what would that be? And a lot of the students, there was a very strong entrepreneurial spirit, and they wanted a business degree. And we launched the business degree with Nyack College. But what Nyack College realized right away was, as we began to see the students getting released, they weren't getting into the business world. So almost all the students were becoming service providers, counselors, social workers. So we switched gears and went more into a behavioral science degree. So we have an AA in liberal arts, an AA in behavioral science, a BS in organizational management and a BS in behavioral science. Degrees that really fit realistically with those social services fields.
From what you've been able to observe, is there any kind of spillover reaction? In other words, if you're reaching, let's say, a dozen inmates in a particular wing of an institution, is there an attitude that spills over into others?
I'm beginning to think you had been in prison at some point. These questions are...
Should be.
The fact is, we never thought in the very beginning when we started this about the rippling effect of the rest of the prison. The supervisory staff, the officers, and the superintendents themselves have continually said, it's great that you have 400 men and women in these programs, but the fact is the rest of the prison is impacted in a positive way that we could have never imagined. So the impact, and even some of the, you know, we have 159 students at Sing Sing, but there's 1,800 men there. So the other men have really bought in on this very positive influence, changing the very culture of the prison.
Now, you're operating this as a non-profit organization.
Yep, no state and federal funding.
That means you have to scramble to get money to keep your organization in business, basically.
I will be asking both of you for a donation at the end. No, really, this has been a daily struggle to keep the doors open.
Is that as much of what you have to do as the executive director?
Yeah, a large part of what I do is
the fundraising, and you reach out to, how do you do that? You reach out to individuals, to corporations?
We started 15 years ago with the local churches and synagogues and congregations in this area, really believing this was important work. There's a redemptive spirit to giving someone a second chance, and we grew out of that. It's our foundation. But since then, Doris and Warren Buffett have gotten involved, Tim Robbins, Ice-T, Harry Belafonte, Whoopi Goldberg. In those different folks getting involved, we've been connected with different foundations, organizations that fund this kind of work, which has given us a chance to now have 400 plus students in 5 facilities. But there are 52,000 men and women and 50 prisons in New York, so we are literally just at the tip of the iceberg.
So you may be scraping the just the edges here of the potential. You were involved in making a documentary which HBO has run, and you're doing
another
2 more
one now
films?
with Public Broadcast Productions. We actually started a film with Moxie Pictures, a small production company here in Manhattan that came in and wanted to tell our story. They were amazing in capturing the essence of that story, being more about prison and more than prison, and really way more about the families that are affected. And we won 9 Best Film and Best Doc Awards with Moxie Pictures, and then HBO picked it up last year. The original movie was called 0%. The second movie with HBO was called The University of Sing Sing, and now we're currently hitting the film festivals with First Degree.
So there will be more public awareness just of this as a result. But you also have a website, and why don't you give that address? So
www.hudsonlink.org, and on the website are the trailers for the movies and what the screening schedule is. We just showed it at the New York State Public Library. We had a great reaction, and we have another one coming up in Rockland County on March 8th.
Now, at the White House, just the other day, President Obama held kind of a summit meeting where there were about 24 leaders in politics, in education, in the prison systems, and his part of his thrust is to take a look at the criminal justice system, how it operates, how people are handled within the criminal justice system. Is that something that you have been involved with?
I'm currently a member of Governor Cuomo's Reentry Task Force here in New York. I'm also working with the New York State Department of Corrections on policy and policy implementations. And recently I was invited to the White House to talk about some of the policy and changes in the criminal justice system. It's been a very exciting time. And quite frankly, someone being brave enough, like the governor and President Obama, to invite folks to the table that have actually lived through this experience, it's scary to some people, and they have not backed down from that challenge.
Really. Now, you are going to be at the National Consortium for Higher Education and Prison on March the 10th. 10 states will be participating. What can we look forward to from that? What's the
So one of the things that's been happening is New York has been building this program. There are several different colleges running this kind of work here. But as I visit with the HBO movie other states and show the movie at different prisons, I'm realizing that some prisons don't even have GED programs. So we've helped 4 other states replicate the program. And what we're thinking about now is with the building of this national consortium, we would actually be able to support other states in the implementation of this, but also be able to support each other. So there are other programs like in San Quentin and St. Louis that have been as old as we are. We can support each other in this work by partnering.
There is a certain element of the political spectrum which says when it comes to criminals, we need to lock them up and throw away the key.
Yeah.
What you're doing is the antithesis of that. Is there a common ground somewhere? Would you have hope in the future of convincing people who have that attitude of the value of this?
I think that when I came home from prison after 2 decades, and for me, I went in when I was 16, came home when I was 32. When I left the gates of Sing Sing, I had more time in prison than out of prison. I'm supposed to be that statistic. I'm not supposed to be in front of you right now. I'm supposed to be back in prison by now. So the fact is,
you know, the recidivism rate is very, very high,
very
in
high.
this country.
What gives me a different opportunity than anyone else that's been through this experience, the only difference from me and the other men and women is that I went to college while I was there. And the only thing I brought home with me after all that time, nearly 2 decades, was that college diploma. But I found out that that was the only thing I needed.
Mm-hmm.
So, as you were developing this program, while you were an inmate in the New York State system, were there people within the system and the administration who were on your side, who pushed you along? How did this happen? You know, only in a Hollywood movie, you know, might you see, you know, a hardcore criminal, you know, with a halo above his head.
Well, in Shawshank Redemption, Tim Robbins was only able to build the prison library because he was helping the warden with his taxes. I never helped the warden with his taxes, but
and that warden happened to be a crook.
A little bit of a crook, but you know, he was doing what he had to do. For us, we were very lucky to begin this brainstorming process at Sing Sing. And I think there are not many people that can say they were lucky to be at Sing Sing. I will say that I was lucky to be there because the warden there at the time, Brian Fisher, believed in second chances and education and saw how they fit together. What happened next, none of us could have seen. So a year into launching this program with his assistance and the support of the Department of Corrections in New York, the governor announced that Brian Fisher was going to be the next Department of Corrections commissioner. So it went from being only at Sing Sing to now growing, and through his help, we're now in 6 facilities.
So the implication in what you just said is that if you had been sent somewhere else to a different prison, this may never have happened.
I truly believe that.
And this 15-year-old program
Would not
just
have
might
started.
not exist.
Yep.
And it's interesting to note, since 1998, how many people Hudson Link has really helped. You have had 303 prisoners granted college degrees since 2001, and currently you serve 334 in the prisons.
Yeah. We have almost 400 men and women currently enrolled in pre-college, 2-year and 4-year programming. And I think when you think about the numbers, yes, 451 men and women have returned to the community, doing amazing things, working, paying taxes. But if you look at the other side, technically 40–50% of those should be back in prison, if we look at the stats. And that costs us, New York taxpayers, $56,000 a year per man and woman. So the fact is, this is saving New York taxpayers millions of dollars a month for something that we're not even paying for. It's all privately funded.
But how do you evaluate a person who is a candidate for your program? Now, you mentioned they have to have a certain education level.
Yeah.
But is there something else that enables you to select people who will get the most out of this? Obviously, just like any outside college, there's some competition because you don't have unlimited slots.
The waiting list is over 2 years long at Sing Sing. And I think one of the things that I've witnessed as the director now of this program, and I think there's a benefit to having gone through it, help run it, and then now being the director, I have some different perspectives than most folks would have. And for me, I don't care how you place on the entrance exam. Your attitude means way more to me. And when someone comes in and just knows that this is the impetus to change the direction of his life and his children's lives and help his community, I mean, this is way bigger than helping one student change the direction of their life. This is about helping communities.
Mm-hmm. Do you find that relatives, excuse me, of victims and prisoners pushed to have Hudson Links help them with this program, or is it mainly self-motivated by the prisoner?
I think self-motivated. We tend to not get into the criminalization or what brought folks to the program. I don't look at the crimes of any of our students. It's not my job. It's not what I want to get into. I'm an educator, and I know the value of the education firsthand. But I also know that it's not a mistake that we have less than a 1% recidivism rate.
This is a very unfair question, and I'll say that at our front. But
I don't want you to stop now.
could you have imagined that this is what your career would end up being?
Even while I was attending classes at Sing Sing and going to school, I never really thought that that was going to help me. I truly thought life after prison was just not going to be a true life. So to be home and employed and have a job that I love going to every morning, it is amazing to me.
Yeah. And you are a new resident of White Plains.
I'm living in White Plains now.
That's right. Now, funding. Let's talk about how Hudson Link for education in prison can be funded. How can people help you? How do they contact you? What are you looking for?
Anyone that's interested in learning more, let alone funding, please look at the website, www.hudsonlink.org. You can see the breadth of the work that we're doing in the facilities that we're in. You can come by the office and see the staff and meet the team. We always have alumni and staff at the office. 50% of our workforce have gone through the program. So you get to meet clients and students at the same time. But also, as we're doing this work, we know that the dollar is spread as far as it could possibly be. To have 400 plus students in college doing college level work for under $1 million a year is pretty frugal.
Mm-hmm. Now, when your professors come in to an institution and conduct classes, do they have to be aware of discipline problems, or is this a completely different atmosphere, totally unrelated to what's going on outside of the classroom walls while those classes are in session?
In our 15 years of doing this work, we've never had any kind of bad incident with the professors or the students in the school area. The kind of unwritten rule in the prison is whatever's going on in the rest of the prison doesn't come to the school area. It's a different culture, it's a different environment, it's a timeout, which is one of the reasons why so many of the students love coming to the college program in school, because no matter how much time you're serving, you step out of that life for a few hours a night.
Do you have any sense from within the prison community of the word of mouth that this program has among various inmates and various institutions?
I cannot walk through any of the prisons without someone recognizing me and thanking me.
Really? And does that happen frequently? And,
yes.
And on what occasions do you end up going back? Well, look, if you have to go back to Sing Sing now, even though your purpose is quite different, don't you have a personal reaction to that?
I don't. First of all, getting to go home at night is a very different, very different feel. But the fact is, the downside of growing up in prison is you grew up in prison. But the upside is that all my friends are now the superintendents of the prisons. And when they call and say, hey, we hear you have a new movie, would you show it to our population? We know the reaction, and we know the influence of seeing someone that's been through it now coming in to speak. It takes a lot of courage to ask someone to come back in, and New York is definitely that courageous institution.
So you've done screenings of
all
the
over New
HBO
York.
film and so forth?
Yep.
And the reaction at the end of the screening?
Standing ovation.
Really?
Yeah. I just did it last week at Green Correctional Facility.
Did you talk, give
Yep.
a lecture
Yep, yep.
afterwards?
And actually, the superintendent allowed me to bring in, because Siena College is the college partner there, so they had the pre-college and college students that are attending Siena classes, and about 60 of the Siena students came in. And we not only watched the movie together, but the Q&A between Siena students and Siena students that obviously live in two very different places is amazing.
So are there relationships that actually start as a result of this?
No.
So the populations, though, still are quite separate.
Yes.
You do
yes.
go your
Yep.
separate ways. If you had the opportunity to address the President of the United States or the governor or someone with a pile of money
Yep.
about your program, what would you tell them in order to convince them that this program needs to survive you, survive the people who actually got it started, and needs to become an institution unto itself?
I think I know firsthand the value of what we're doing, and I also know and have witnessed the growth of these men and women as they fall into the same footsteps that I've followed. But what I didn't know until these past 2 or 3 years was, as the men and women are released, and their first stop with their family is our office to pick up their laptop, to pick up their suit, to thank our staff, is that this is much bigger than helping one student. This is changing cycles of poverty and cycle of recidivism from the 5 most impoverished communities in New York City that are filling our New York State Department of Corrections. And the fact is, if we could put even the smallest, slow that down the smallest way, we could really impact not just New York, but this country in a positive way.
Right. Well, Sean Pica, Executive Director of Hudson Link, you have been heard, and people can go to the website, hudsonlink.org, for more information. Thank you for being our guest. You're doing tremendous work.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Right. John Bailey, Peter Katz, good night for People to be Heard.